You already know something is wrong. You have felt it for months, maybe longer. The phone that used to light up with names you trusted has gone quiet, not all at once, not with a fight or a falling out, just a slow, creeping silence that settled in like fog and never lifted. And if you keep pretending it is not happening, if you keep telling yourself people are just busy, life just got in the way, you will wake up one morning and realize the people you called your closest friends have not reached out in a year, maybe two. This is not about popularity. This is not about being likable. This is about something far more uncomfortable, something most people will never tell you to your face. And by the end of this, you will understand exactly what happened. The question is whether you are ready to hear it. There is a version of this story you have been carrying. It sounds reasonable. It sounds mature. It goes something like this. People grow apart. Priorities shift. Everyone gets busy with work, with family, with the ordinary weight of adult life. And that is true. It is true enough to believe, true enough to repeat when someone asks why you do not see your old friends anymore. But there is a difference between people drifting apart and people pulling away. And somewhere inside, you know which one actually happened. Drifting is mutual. Drifting is two people slowly losing the thread at the same pace. What you experienced was not that. What you experienced was a withdrawal, a quiet, deliberate stepping back that you felt in your chest before you could name it with your mind. The psychologist Irvin Yalom spent decades studying how people relate to one another and how they stop. He observed something that most self-help content refuses to say plainly. He found that the people who lose their closest relationships are rarely the ones who did something obviously wrong. They are the ones who changed the unspoken contract without realizing there was a contract at all. Every friendship operates on invisible agreements. Agreements about how much honesty is allowed, how much success is tolerable, how much growth is acceptable before it starts to feel like a threat. And the moment you cross one of those invisible lines, the moment you become someone your friends did not sign up to know, the silence begins. Not because they stopped caring, but because your presence started making them uncomfortable in a way they could not articulate. And what people cannot articulate, they avoid. That is the part no one tells you. The silence was not random, it was a response. But here is what most people never realize about this pattern. And it goes deeper than hurt feelings or mismatched schedules. There is a concept in Jungian psychology called the shadow, the parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge. Jung argued that we do not just hide our darkness, we also hide our light. He called this the golden shadow, the unlived potential, the greatness, the ambition, the clarity that a person buries, because it is too threatening to the people around them. When you grow, when you start facing yourself honestly, when you stop drinking to numb, when you leave the job that was killing you, when you begin therapy, when you start reading, thinking, changing, you are not just improving your life, you are activating your golden shadow. And that activation sends a signal to everyone around you. The signal says, I am no longer who I was. And for the people who built their sense of self around who you used to be, that signal is not inspiring. It is destabilizing. Think of it like this. Imagine 5 people standing in a circle, each holding a rope tied to the same center post. The post is the shared identity of the group. the shared habits, the shared complaints, the shared level of ambition. When one person drops their rope and walks away from the circle, the tension on every other rope changes. The structure wobbles, and the remaining four do not think good for them. They think something is wrong. This is not cruelty. It is not even conscious. It is the deep, automatic self-preservation of the ego. Your growth confronted them with their own stagnation, and rather than face that mirror, they stepped away from it. The sociologist Nicholas Christakis documented this in his research on social networks. He found that when one person in a group changes a core behavior, quitting smoking, losing weight, shifting values, the statistical probability of their closest friends doing the same rises sharply. But so does the probability of disconnection. The group either transforms together or it fractures. There is rarely a middle ground. Your friends did not stop calling because they forgot about you. They stopped calling because remembering you had become uncomfortable. Tell me in the comments, which of your friendships was the first to go quiet after you started changing? Not of the ones that ended in arguments, the ones that just faded, the ones where you noticed the texts getting shorter, the invitations drying up, the warmth cooling into politeness. Write it below. You do not need to explain the whole story. Just name the friendship. Just name the shift. There is something that happens when you stop carrying that silence alone, when you put it into words, even briefly, even to strangers. It stops being a private wound and starts becoming something you can actually look at clearly. And if this is the kind of thinking you want to keep doing, subscribe. What comes next goes deeper than the diagnosis. We are just getting started. Now that you understand the mechanism, you can start to see how it showed up. Specifically, precisely, in the details of your own life. The first pattern is the most painful one. You became a mirror. You started making different choices. Maybe you stopped going out every weekend. Maybe you started waking up earlier, reading more, caring about things that used to bore you. And you did not announce it. You did not lecture anyone. You just quietly changed. But your friends noticed. They noticed because your new behavior was a silent commentary on their old behavior, even though you never intended it that way. When you stopped drinking, they heard, your drinking is a problem. When you started exercising, they heard, your body is failing. When you got serious about your career, they heard, you are wasting your life. You said none of these things, but your choices said them louder than words ever could. And so they pulled back. Not because they hated you, because looking at you had become like looking at everything they were avoiding in themselves. The second pattern is subtler. You stopped performing. Every social group has roles. The funny one, the reliable one, the one who always listens, the one who never causes trouble, you had a role, and for years you played it without questioning it, because it felt like belonging. But then something shifted. Maybe it was gradual, maybe it was sudden. You started to feel the weight of the mask. You started noticing how tired you were after every gathering. Not physically tired, but the deep fatigue of having performed a version of yourself that no longer fit. And when you stopped performing, when you showed up as the quieter, more honest, less entertaining version of yourself, the group did not know what to do with you. They did not reject you outright. They just stopped including you. The invitation slowed. The group chat moved on without you. And you were left wondering what you did wrong. When the truth is, you finally did something right. The third pattern is the one that confuses people the most. You started needing less. You became more comfortable alone, not in a bitter way, not in a wounded, I do not need anyone way, in a genuine, settled way. You found that silence did not scare you anymore, that a Friday night with a book felt more nourishing than a bar full of acquaintances. And this is where it gets paradoxical. The less you needed from your friendships, the more your friendships needed from you. Because many relationships are held together not by genuine connection, but by mutual need. When one person stops needing the other, the entire structure reveals itself for what it always was. Your friends did not lose you. They lost their function in your life. And without that function, they did not know how to stay. There is a fourth pattern. And it is the one most people refuse to admit. You raise the standard for what connection means to you. You stop tolerating conversations that went nowhere. You stop pretending to laugh at things that were not funny. You stop saying yes to plans that drained you just to avoid the guilt of saying no. And the people who could not meet that standard, the people who were comfortable at the old level, experienced your new standard as rejection. Even though you never rejected them, you simply stopped pretending that surface-level interaction was enough. This is the cruelest irony of personal growth. The more honest you become about what you need, the fewer people can provide it. Not because honest connection is rare in the world, but because it is rare in the world you used to inhabit. Now, here is where everything you have just recognized connects to something larger, something that changes how you see, not just your friendships, but the entire architecture of human belonging. The philosopher Martin Buber drew a distinction that most people never encounter. But once you hear it, you cannot unhear it. He described two fundamental ways humans relate to each other. He called them I-it and I-thou. In an I-it relationship, the other person is a function. They are what they do for you. Entertainment, validation, comfort, distraction. You do not see them. You see their usefulness. And they do not see you either. They see yours. In an I-thou relationship, something entirely different happens. You encounter the other person as a whole being, not as a role, not as a function, as a presence. And in that encounter, both people are changed. Most friendships, and this is the part that hurts, are I-it relationships wearing the costume of I-thou. They feel like connection. They use the language of connection, but they are transactions dressed in affection. When you started growing, you did not just change your behavior. You shifted from I-it to I-thou. You started wanting to be seen, truly seen, and to see others the same way. And the friendships that were built on function could not survive that shift. This is not a failure of your friendships. It is a revelation of what they always were. Jung wrote about this directly. He said that the first half of life is about building the ego, constructing an identity, finding your place in the social world, accumulating the relationships and roles that make you feel real. But the second half of life, the half that begins whenever you start waking up, is about dismantling what no longer serves the deeper self. And friendships built for the first half of life do not automatically survive into the second half. They were designed for a version of you that no longer exists. Expecting them to hold is like expecting childhood shoes to fit adult feet. The shoes are not broken. Your feet simply grew. There is another layer to this, a modern one that amplifies everything. We live inside an economy of attention. Every relationship now competes with infinite alternatives. Your friend does not just choose between calling you and not calling you. They choose between calling you and scrolling, streaming, swiping, consuming. And in that economy, the relationships that survive are the ones that require the least effort and deliver the most immediate reward. Deep friendship is not efficient. It requires patience, vulnerability, silence, discomfort. It requires showing up when there is no reward. It requires tolerating the other person's growth, even when it threatens your own stability. Most people are no longer willing to pay that cost, not because they are bad people, but because the entire structure of modern life has trained them to optimize for ease. And real friendship is not easy. So you are left with a grief that has no name. It is not the grief of a breakup. It is not the grief of a death. It is the grief of realizing that the people you thought would be there forever were only there for a season, and the season ended without anyone saying goodbye. And this grief is complicated because it is tangled with guilt. You wonder if you should have tried harder, if you should have been less honest, if you should have kept the mask on a little longer, if the price of becoming yourself was too high. But here is what you need to understand, and this is the turn that changes everything. The silence was not a punishment. It was a signal. Every friendship that fell away was a friendship that required you to be less than you are. Every phone that stopped ringing was a phone that only rang when you were performing. Every person who pulled back was a person who needed your stagnation more than they valued your presence. That is not loss. That is clarity. The Stoic philosopher Seneca wrote something that cuts through 20 centuries of noise. He said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a great deal of it." And he was not only talking about hours, he was talking about the years we spend maintaining relationships that cost us our authenticity. If something just shifted in you, if you recognized your own story in what we just described, a like puts this in front of someone else who is sitting in that same silence right now, wondering what went wrong. The friends who left were not your people. They were your practice. They taught you what connection looks like when it is conditional, so that when the real thing arrives, you will recognize it instantly. Your loneliness is not a wound. It is a clearing. It is the space that had to open before something true could grow in it. So what do you do with this understanding? Not as a theory, as a practice, as something you carry into the next hour, the next conversation, the next moment. You feel that familiar ache of being alone in a room full of contacts who never call. The first practice is the hardest. You sit with the silence instead of filling it. Every impulse you have to text someone you have not heard from, to reach out just to confirm you still exist in their world, pause before you act on it. Not forever. Just long enough to ask yourself one question. Am I reaching out because I want connection, or because I cannot tolerate the emptiness? There is a difference, and learning to feel that difference is the beginning of everything. When you reach out from want, you are extending yourself. When you reach out from panic, you are abandoning yourself. The silence is not your enemy. It is your teacher. It is showing you exactly how much of your social life was built on fear rather than genuine desire. The second practice is grieving without bitterness. This is where most people get stuck. They understand what happened, and then they harden. They turn the insight into armor. They say, I do not need anyone. They say, people are disappointing. And they build a fortress out of their understanding and call it strength. It is not strength. It is the shadow of the wound pretending to be healed. The real practice is to grieve the friendships honestly. To say, I love those people. They mattered to me. And it hurts that they could not stay. To feel that without turning it into a story about how the world is broken or people are shallow. Because the moment you harden, you close the same door that your growth just opened. You become unavailable to the very connection you are grieving the loss of. Grief without bitterness is the most difficult emotional skill a human being can develop. And it is the one that makes real intimacy possible. The third practice is building from truth instead of from need. The next time you meet someone, the next time a conversation goes deeper than you expected, the next time you feel that rare spark of genuine recognition, do not rush it. Do not perform. Do not become the version of yourself you think they want. Show up as the person your old friends could not handle. The honest one, the quiet one, the one who would rather have silence than small talk. And see who stays. Because the friendships that survive authenticity, the ones that do not require your mask, your performance, your old self, those are the friendships that will hold weight. Those are the ones that will still be there in 10 years, not because of habit, not because of convenience, but because they were built on the only foundation that lasts, two people who chose to see each other clearly and did not look away. Remember the silence you noticed at the beginning? The phone that stopped ringing, the names that faded, the slow, quiet withdrawal that you could not explain. You can explain it now. It was not rejection. It was not proof that something is wrong with you. It was the sound of a life rearranging itself around a person who finally started becoming real. And that rearrangement, as painful as it is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of the chapter where you stop collecting people and start finding them. You are not alone because you are broken. You are alone because you stopped pretending. And the world has not caught up yet. But it will. It always does. Not on your schedule, not in the way you expect, but in the way that matters. The people who are meant to find you will not need you to shrink. They will not need your mask. They will not flinch when you tell the truth. And when they arrive, and they will arrive, you will know them instantly. Because for the first time, you will not be performing. You will just be there. And so will they. If you want to keep going, subscribe. The work we did here tonight is not a one-time event. It is a practice. And the next video continues exactly where this one leaves off, not with another list of reasons you are alone, but with the deeper architecture of how real connection is built once the false ones have fallen away. This is the kind of thinking that does not happen in most places. It happens here, and it happens every week for the people who are willing to stay with it. The loneliness you carry is not a life sentence. It is the space between who you were and who you are becoming. And that space, as empty as it feels right now, is the most sacred ground you will ever stand on. The friends who left were never the answer. You were the answer. You always were. Thank you for being here. I will see you in the next one.